A series of business proposals I couldn't ignore. At first, they seemed like the kind of legitimate offers every business owner dreams of, a group of wealthy investors looking to buy out my shipping company. They promised a smooth transition, a lucrative deal, and a chance to expand operations across the globe. The more I looked at them, the more tempting it seemed. After all, the shipping industry had been rough in recent years. More competition, tighter margins, and rising costs made every decision feel like a gamble. But as I went over the proposals more carefully, something didn't sit right with me. These investors were offering more money than I could have dreamed of, far more than my business was worth, even with potential future growth. The numbers were too good to be true, and their aggressive push for a quick deal made me suspicious. I was used to hard bargaining, but these offers came with a certain urgency that felt off. The proposals kept coming, each one more lucrative than the last, but with subtle changes, faster timelines, bigger incentives. It didn't take long for me to realize something wasn't right. They were pressuring me to make a decision fast, almost like they were pushing me into a corner. I didn't trust these strangers. There were no clear backgrounds on their firm, and the names behind the proposals seemed purposely vague. The offers came from a company called Volkov Group, but there was very little about them online, no website, no social media presence, and no public records. It was as if they had created a shell company to operate under. It was when I started doing a little more digging that I started to uncover some troubling connections. Volkov. That name wasn't just a coincidence. It had ties to a network I had heard about in my past, Russian criminal syndicates. I knew enough about international smuggling and underground operations to know what that meant. The Volkov Group wasn't just a legitimate investment firm. They were a front for something much darker. As a Navy SEAL, I had spent years gathering intelligence, analyzing threats, and acting under pressure. The moment I realized who I was dealing with, I knew this wasn't just a business deal. It was an attempt to infiltrate my company and take control of it, one way or another. I didn't need to be a seasoned intelligence officer to know that I was in danger. I had to be smart. I had to act fast. And most importantly, I had to protect what I had worked so hard to build. The first sign that things were escalating came a few days after I received the last proposal. I was in my office, finishing up a few reports when I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. It wasn't unusual to see cars around, but the vehicle had been parked in the same spot for over an hour, no movement, no one getting in or out. My curiosity piqued. I kept an eye on it, watching it through the blinds. I didn't like the feeling in my gut. Later that afternoon, two men approached the building. They were well-dressed, but their mannerisms didn't fit the profile of typical business professionals. They walked toward the entrance with an air of confidence, almost arrogance, but something in their body language didn't sit right with me. They weren't here for a friendly chat or a routine business meeting. I could feel it. I stepped out from behind my desk and went to the front door. They were still standing by the lobby, exchanging a few words in a language I couldn't place. When they saw me, one of them smiled and gave me a nod, as if expecting me to open the door for them. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady, though the alarm bells in my head were ringing. One of the men, the taller one, stepped forward. He was in his early 40s, wearing a sleek dark suit and a crisp white shirt. His accent was thick, unmistakably Russian, and he spoke with a tone that was far too confident for a first meeting. "We're here on behalf of the Volkov Group," he said, his words sharp and precise. "We've been reviewing your shipping business and would like to discuss how we can move forward with the acquisition." It was too direct, too blunt, and I didn't like the way he said it, like he was already assuming my agreement. "We've already received your proposal," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm still considering my options. If you'd like to set up a meeting, we can schedule one." The taller man's smile didn't fade, but there was a certain coldness to it now. "We believe this matter is urgent," he said, his words laced with a subtle threat. "Your company's future is at stake. We would like to ensure that you make the right decision." "Time is money, Mr. Callahan." I froze for a moment. The way he said "right decision" sent a shiver down my spine. It was clear now, these men weren't just investors. They were sent to pressure me, to force my hand. And if I didn't play along, there would be consequences. This wasn't about negotiating a deal. It was about intimidation. "Your proposal is under review," I said, stepping back from the door. "I'll contact you once I'm ready to move forward." Without waiting for a response, I shut the door and locked it behind me. I could feel my heart rate increasing, my mind racing. I wasn't naive. I had dealt with high-pressure situations before, but this felt different. These men weren't just here to talk business. They were here to control it. I immediately contacted my lawyer, explaining the situation. I needed to know what my options were, especially now that I was sure I was dealing with something much bigger than I'd initially thought. I also started thinking about my next move. If these men were part of the Russian Mafia, then they wouldn't back off easily. They had their sights set on my business, and I had no intention of giving it up without a fight. The situation took a darker turn the following morning. I had just settled into my office when I received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was low, cold, and unmistakably Russian. "I trust you had a pleasant meeting with my associates yesterday," the voice said, almost mockingly. "I hope you understand the gravity of the situation." I immediately recognized it as one of the men from the day before, the one with the thicker accent. His tone was casual, but I could feel the underlying menace. "I don't appreciate threats, and I don't respond to pressure tactics," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told you yesterday, I'm still reviewing your offer. If you're calling to speed up the process, that won't happen." There was a pause on the other end, then a soft laugh. "Pressure? I'm not pressuring you, Mr. Callahan. I'm simply offering you a way out. You're a reasonable man, and I'm sure you'll make the right decision. But if you choose not to cooperate, well, that's your choice." Before I could respond, he hung up. I sat there in silence for a moment, my mind racing. It wasn't just a business proposal anymore. These people weren't looking for a partnership or even a friendly transaction. They were looking to take over, and if I didn't comply, they would use whatever means necessary to force me into submission. The feeling that had been gnawing at me for the past few days was becoming clearer. This wasn't a simple corporate takeover. The Russian Mafia was involved, and they had a history of getting what they wanted, no matter the cost. Not long after the call, I noticed something odd. A black SUV had parked outside my office again. It was the same vehicle I had seen before, the one that had been lingering on the street. This time, I watched as two men in dark suits enter the building. They weren't there for business. They were here to make a point. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched them walk toward the front entrance. One of them turned and glanced up, catching my gaze. His look was cold, calculating, a silent threat that sent a chill down my spine. I knew they weren't here to negotiate anymore. I immediately reached for my phone and called my lawyer. I wasn't going to let this escalate any further without being prepared. I needed to know what legal steps I could take to protect my business. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't something the law could fix overnight. I needed more than just legal advice. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. It wasn't long before the situation escalated further. A few days after the ominous phone call and the visit from the two men, I received a tip-off from one of my trusted employees. They had overheard something in the warehouse that confirmed my suspicions. There were definitely more than just investors involved. One of the warehouse workers, a longtime employee who had seen his fair share of shady dealings in his time, came to me with a worried look. "I overheard one of the guys talking, Mr. Callahan," he said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "They're not just here to buy out the business. They're setting up shop permanently." My heart sank. "What do you mean, setting up shop?" "They're not talking about making deals. They're talking about taking control of the docks, the shipments, everything." I heard them mention Volkov. That's the name they keep using. "It's not just some rich investors. It's the Russian Mafia." The words hit me like a freight train. I knew what Volkov meant. The Russian Mafia had been known for infiltrating legitimate businesses, running their illegal operations under the guise of something legitimate. The shipping industry had long been a target for them, and now they had their sights set on mine. I had dealt with dangerous situations before, but this was personal. They weren't just looking to buy my company. They were trying to take over, using intimidation, manipulation, and force. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how far-reaching this could become. They had the connections, the power, and the ruthlessness to run operations on a global scale. But I wasn't going down without a fight. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about protecting what I had built. I had worked too hard to get to this point, and there was no way I was letting a criminal syndicate control everything I had worked for. I knew I couldn't take them on alone, but I had allies. I immediately reached out to a few old contacts, including law enforcement and a couple of private security experts I knew from my past. I needed intel, and I needed to strike back before the Mafia could put their plan into action. As I prepared my next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The Russians weren't the type to wait for negotiations. They would strike fast, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. The very next day, my worst fears came to life. I had just finished meeting with my lawyer and security consultant, making plans to protect my assets, when I received a call from my warehouse manager. His voice was shaking. "Mr. Callahan, I don't know what to say. The docks, they're wrecked. There's damage to the equipment, and some of the storage containers are gone. They've taken everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. The Russian Mafia had made their move. I didn't even need to ask who was responsible. This was their style. They didn't make idle threats. They didn't negotiate. They took what they wanted, and they made sure the message was clear. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, I said, my voice barely steady. I hung up the phone, grabbed my jacket, and headed straight for the warehouse. By the time I arrived, the damage was evident. The main docks were in chaos, containers overturned, machinery sabotaged, and an eerie stillness hung in the air. But what struck me most was the unmistakable symbol spray painted across the largest storage container, a simple yet unmistakable marking, a red letter V. I knew exactly what it meant. The Volkov group was sending a message. They wanted me to know who was in control now. They wanted me to know that resistance was futile. I stood there, fists clenched, my heart pounding with rage. I had dealt with danger before, but this was an attack on everything I had built. These men were trying to destroy my company, to break me down, and I couldn't let that happen. As I surveyed the damage, I heard the distinct rumble of an engine approaching. Turning around, I saw a black SUV slowly pulling up. I knew it was them. This was no coincidence. The same two men from earlier, the ones who had visited my office, stepped out of the vehicle. Their faces were cold, unreadable. They were here to finish what they had started. The taller one, the one who had threatened me before, walked up to me slowly, a smug smile on his face. "Mr. Callahan," he said, his voice casual but tinged with a sense of finality. "I trust you've seen the message we've sent." I couldn't control the anger boiling inside me. "You're making a huge mistake," I said, my voice low but steady. "This ends now. I won't back down." The man chuckled, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You don't have a choice. You either accept our terms or you lose everything. It's that simple." He was right about one thing. It was simple. But I wasn't going to lose. Not to these criminals. Not on my watch. "I'll make you a deal," I said, stepping forward, my voice firm. "You leave now. Walk away. And I'll consider this the last time we speak. But if you don't take your hands off my business, then I will make sure you regret it. I'll make sure you never operate here again." For a moment, the man didn't speak. He studied me, like he was weighing whether I was bluffing. Finally, he spoke, his tone colder than before. "You're out of your depth, Mr. Callahan. But if you insist on making this a fight, we'll see how far you're willing to go." He turned on his heel and walked back to the SUV, his men following behind him. I watched them drive away, my fists still clenched, my resolve solidifying. The time for negotiation was over. Now, I was going to take the fight to them. I stood there for a moment, watching the black SUV disappear into the distance, my mind racing. The Russians had crossed the line. They weren't just trying to buy my company, they were trying to break me. They wanted control, and they were willing to destroy everything in their path to get it. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had spent years building my shipping company from the ground up. It wasn't just a business to me, it was my life's work. And I wasn't about to let a criminal syndicate swoop in and take it without a fight. The problem was, I knew I wasn't equipped to deal with them head-on, at least, not in the conventional way. These weren't just business rivals. These are Mafia operatives with resources, connections, and a ruthless streak that ran deep. But I wasn't alone in this fight. As a former Navy SEAL, I've been trained to handle situations like this. I had been through high-stakes missions, dealing with enemies much more dangerous than the Russian Mafia. This wasn't just a business problem, it was a tactical one. And I had the skills to turn the tide. I immediately called my old contacts from the military, men I had trusted on operations all over the world. The first one I called was Alex, a former teammate and a logistics expert who knew how to handle high-pressure situations. He'd run missions that involved much more than what I was dealing with now. "What's going on, Callahan?" Alex asked when he picked up the phone. He could tell from my voice that this wasn't just a friendly chat. "I've got a situation with the Russian Mafia," I said. "They're trying to take over my company. They've already wrecked the docks and sent me a message. I need help. I need a team." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You've got it. You want me to assemble a crew?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice firm. "I need a team to gather intel, track their movements, and be ready to step in. We're going to shut this down before they take any more ground." "I'm on it," Alex said. "I'll gather the guys. We'll be ready." After hanging up with Alex, I made a few more calls to trusted allies. I reached out to a private security company I had worked with in the past and asked them to provide protection for my office and the remaining warehouse locations. No more surprises. I had to be prepared for anything. While I waited for my team to assemble, I took another hard look at my options. The Russians wanted control, but I couldn't give it to them. The only way out was to show them that I wasn't afraid to fight back. I couldn't wait for the law to step in, not when I was dealing with an operation this ruthless. This was personal. I wasn't just protecting a business, I was protecting everything I had worked for. The Russians may have thought they could intimidate me into submission, but I was about to turn the tables. It was time for them to see what happened when you mess with the wrong person. As I waited for my team to assemble, I knew that just having muscle on hand wouldn't be enough. We needed to gather solid evidence, enough to take these guys down and ensure they couldn't wiggle out of it later. I wasn't about to go into this blindly or leave any room for doubt. I had to build a case, and I had to do it fast. I reached out to a private investigator I had worked with on previous operations, someone I knew could dig deep and get results. His name was Tony, and he had a network of informants and access to resources that could help uncover what the Russian Mafia was up to behind closed doors. Within hours, Tony had a full rundown of the people involved in the Volkov group. He traced their operations, their money flow, and even some of the players at the top of the chain. What he uncovered was both shocking and useful. The Volkov group was more than just a mafia syndicate. They were linked to a larger network of arms trafficking, money laundering, and underground smuggling. It wasn't just about the shipping business. They had their fingers in everything. Tony had also managed to track down one of their lesser-known contacts, a mid-level operator who was used to make shady deals for the Volkov group. This man had a history of fraud and smuggling, and Tony managed to get him on the phone, agreeing to meet under the condition that he wouldn't be harmed. It was a risky move, but one that could pay off. Meanwhile, I had Alex and his team set up surveillance on the warehouse locations and the Volkov group's known front businesses. We needed to know exactly what they were planning. Any hint of movement, any new shipments, they needed to be tracked and documented. As the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, I could feel the pressure mounting. The cartel wasn't just focused on shipping. They were using my company as a stepping stone to control other industries, and they were making their move now. They'd already sent the warning, and I could tell they were preparing for the next phase of their takeover. The more intel we gathered, the clearer it became that they had been using my company as a front. They'd infiltrated key positions, planted people on the inside, and had likely been siphoning money from my operations for months. I had to shut them down before they could make their final move. With evidence piling up and my team in position, I knew the time had come to take action. We had the goods we needed to expose the Volkov group and their entire operation. But we had to move fast. If we gave them any more time, they'd go deeper underground, and we might lose our chance. I called my lawyer and shared the progress we had made. "We're going in. We have enough to bring them down, but we need to act quickly." He confirmed that he'd already started making calls to the authorities, ensuring that when we were ready to strike, we'd have the legal backing to back it up. The wheels were in motion. The Russians had underestimated me, and now they were going to feel the full force of my resolve. With the evidence mounting and the law on our side, it was time to take the fight to the Russians on their turf. The intel we had gathered from Tony, coupled with Alex's surveillance team, had given us everything we needed to make a move. But now, we had to ensure we executed this operation with the same precision and strategy that I had used on countless missions as a Navy SEAL. I knew that the Volkov group wouldn't just fold easily. They were professionals, and they had likely set up layers of protection around their operations. I couldn't risk walking into a trap, so I made sure that every step of our plan was calculated. This wouldn't just be a raid, it would be a counterintelligence operation. I met with Alex and the rest of the team in a safe location, a warehouse just outside of town that we could use as a base of operations. We went over the plan. We would target 3 key locations, 2 warehouses and a shipping office they were using as a front for their operations. We needed to shut down these operations before they could escape or destroy the evidence. I gave the team their assignments. Alex would lead a tactical unit to hit the shipping office. I would personally oversee the warehouse operations. The goal was to arrest the Volkov Group's operatives, seize all illegal shipments, and dismantle their operations completely. The evidence we had gathered from their smuggling routes and money laundering activities would be the final blow that would expose them. I wasn't just acting out of anger anymore. I was executing a plan, a well-thought-out strategy to take down a criminal empire and protect my business, my team, and the community. We knew the risks. There was no guarantee the operation would go off without a hitch. The Russians would fight back, but I wasn't about to let fear stop me. I had spent years operating in dangerous environments, making decisions under pressure, and this was no different. With everything in place, I gave the signal. Move out. The team dispersed, and we made our way to the first target, the warehouse. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the area. The trucks had already started to roll in, and I knew we couldn't wait any longer. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we approached the warehouse, my SEAL instincts kicking in. I knew how to move under pressure, how to stay calm when chaos erupted around me. I signaled for the team to spread out, taking up positions around the perimeter. Everything was set. Now, all we had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. As we positioned ourselves around the perimeter of the warehouse, I could feel the tension building. The plan had been set in motion, but nothing in these kinds of operations was guaranteed. The Russians were professionals. They wouldn't just roll over. They had been running this operation for too long and would likely have contingencies in place. I checked my gear one last time, making sure everything was in place. I made eye contact with Alex, giving him a silent signal that we were ready to go. He nodded, confirming his team was in position. We had to be quick and efficient. Every second counted. The first wave of their trucks arrived. I could see the men unloading crates from the back of the vehicles, moving quickly, as if they had something important to hide. They weren't just unloading regular goods. The crates were sealed with plastic and packed tightly, just like the ones I'd seen before. I knew this was the moment. The shipment we had tracked for weeks was finally here, and this was the last chance to stop them. I whispered into my earpiece, "It's time. Move in." Alex and his team moved in on the side entrance of the warehouse, securing the loading docks. At the same time, I led my team toward the main entrance. We moved silently, our footsteps muffled by the cover of night. Every movement had to be precise. The last thing I wanted was to alert anyone inside that we were coming. As we reached the front of the building, I gave the signal to breach. The doors were kicked open in a swift, practiced motion, and we stormed inside. The cartel's men didn't even know what hit them. We hit hard and fast, securing the operatives before they had a chance to react. The warehouse was chaotic. The sound of shouting and struggling filled the air as we moved through the space, rounding up the cartel members one by one. There was no room for negotiation. These men weren't going to back down easily, but we had the advantage. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and unprepared for the speed and precision of our assault. I spotted one of the men trying to flee toward the back, his hands reaching for a hidden weapon. I moved quickly, blocking his escape route and tackling him to the ground before he could make a move. My hand was on his throat in an instant, making it clear that resistance wasn't an option. "Stay down," I growled, securing his hands behind his back. "You're done." At the same time, Alex's team was sweeping the other side of the warehouse, taking down the remaining cartel members. We had neutralized the majority of them in just a few minutes, but I knew the battle wasn't over yet. There were still the masterminds behind the operation to deal with, whoever was pulling the strings from the top. I motioned for one of my team members to secure the room and keep an eye on the prisoners while I went further inside. As we moved deeper into the warehouse, I could feel the atmosphere shift. This was the heart of the operation, the nerve center. It was where the money, the drugs, and the dirty deals were being made. And I was about to take it all down. We moved further into the heart of the warehouse, the air thick with tension. The closer we got to the back office, the more I could feel the weight of the operation resting on my shoulders. This wasn't just a typical bust. This was the culmination of weeks of planning, a direct confrontation with the Russian Mafia, and a chance to end their reign of terror in this region for good. I motioned to my team to take the corners and positions, ensuring we wouldn't be caught off guard. There were still some key players to find. We had captured several of the lower-level operatives, but I knew there were more behind the scenes, those who had orchestrated the entire operation. The back-office door was guarded, but it was no match for us. One swift, well-coordinated move, and we had the door open. Inside, I saw two men frantically searching through papers, looking for something. Their eyes widened in shock when they saw us. "You're too late," one of them sneered, his Russian accent thick. "The operation is already bigger than you think. You think you can stop us? You have no idea who you're dealing with." His words were meant to intimidate, but I wasn't moved. "You're finished," I said, my voice cold. "This operation ends now." I moved forward, grabbing the man by the collar and slamming him against the desk. He gasped for air, his eyes wide with fear. It was clear that the weight of the situation was sinking in. His bravado had vanished in the face of someone who wasn't afraid to take them down. "You don't get to run your operation anymore," I said firmly. "You're going to help us bring down the rest of your network." "Now." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking to the other individual in the room, who was already scrambling for a hidden button beneath the desk. But it was too late. I was faster. I kicked the desk, knocking the man off balance, and secured his hands behind his back. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of movement from the prisoners we had captured earlier. I motioned for one of the agents to start collecting documents from the desk, plans, shipments, contact information. We needed to dismantle their operation entirely, and every shred of evidence would be crucial. I took a deep breath, my focus sharpening. This wasn't just about closing one warehouse. It was about cutting off their entire network. I called Harris over the comms. "We've got the mastermind behind this operation. He's talking, but we need to go after the rest. The shipments, the money, everything." Harris responded quickly. "Roger that, Chief. We'll keep things contained." We got back up on the way for the other warehouse. With the pieces falling into place, I knew this was it. The final takedown. The Russian Mafia was no longer a shadow lurking in the background of my business. It was crumbling, piece by piece. But as I looked around the room, I couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. We had won this battle, but there were still other players in the game. It wasn't over yet, but at least now the scales were tipping in our favor. As we moved to secure the rest of the warehouse, I could feel the operation shifting into its final phase. The rest of the cartel members we had apprehended were being processed, their hands cuffed, and their movements restricted. Their faces were a mixture of fear and disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen to them. They were the ones who controlled the game, and now they were the ones getting caught in it. The evidence we had gathered from the back office was invaluable. It wasn't just a collection of papers. It was the backbone of their entire operation. We had names, locations, communication logs, and a complete record of shipments and financial transactions. It wasn't just about busting them now. It was about making sure they couldn't rise again. Every detail we uncovered made the case airtight. I turned to one of the federal agents who had been helping us coordinate. "Get these files to the DA immediately. We need to make sure these guys don't slip away through some loophole. No deals, no backdoor negotiations. This ends here." He nodded and quickly left to gather the evidence. I knew it was in good hands, but I also knew the Russians had resources. There was always the chance they could try to escape. We couldn't take our foot off the gas now. The longer we stayed in the warehouse, the more chances they had to pull strings and disappear into the shadows. "Where's the rest of the team?" I asked Alex, who was overseeing the remaining sweep. "They've got the second warehouse locked down. We're getting everything we need to pull the entire operation apart," Alex replied. "I've got eyes on the docks too. Nothing's getting out of here." It was a relief to know that we were cutting off every possible escape route. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about shutting down one operation. The Russian Mafia was entrenched in multiple industries: shipping, arms dealing, and worse. If we took down one of their networks, another could easily pop up in its place. It was a game of whack-a-mole, and the only way to win was to take out the whole network. I turned to Harris, who was standing by one of the prisoners. "Get this guy talking." I want every name, every contact. We need to know where the rest of their operations are. Now, Harris nodded, moving toward the prisoner. We'll get him to cooperate. Don't worry. With the main targets secured, I moved toward the back of the warehouse, where the remaining shipments were stacked high in crates. I began scanning the contents: drugs, weapons, stolen goods. It was all there, stored away for distribution. I called in the evidence, making sure that everything was documented and tagged for the authorities. The finality of it all hit me like a wave. This wasn't just a successful bust. This was a takedown of an empire. It was the beginning of the end for the Russian Mafia's grip on my business and the region. But I also knew that the fight wasn't truly over. The Mafia had connections far and wide, and there would be people who would try to fill the void we'd created. But as long as I was breathing, they wouldn't get the chance. The dust began to settle as we completed the final sweep of the warehouse. The last of the cartel's operatives were in custody, and all evidence of their illicit activities was secured. The weight of the situation lifted off my shoulders, but there was still a sense of caution in the air. The battle was over, but the war? That was far from won. As we escorted the last of the prisoners out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We had taken down an organized, dangerous criminal syndicate. We had sent a message loud and clear. I wasn't someone they could just push around. This victory wasn't just about taking down a mafia operation. It was about protecting my legacy, my team, and my business. I made a quick call to my lawyer and then to law enforcement, giving them the go-ahead to begin the formal processing of the prisoners. Make sure they don't get off easy, I said. We've got enough evidence to make sure they're behind bars for a long time. The rest of the team was still busy documenting everything, tagging evidence, and preparing the arrest paperwork. But I took a moment to step outside, where the cool night air hit my face. I looked out over the quiet docks, once a place of tension and fear, now a place of hope. My company was safe for now, but it was going to take work to rebuild the damage the Russians had caused. In the days that followed, things started to fall into place. The authorities took over the investigation, and it wasn't long before we saw the full extent of the Russian Mafia's reach. Their network extended across multiple industries, but thanks to the evidence we had gathered, law enforcement was able to take down several other parts of their operation. Key players were arrested, and others went into hiding, knowing they had no safe haven left. But even with the legal victories and the Mafia dismantled, there was still work to be done. My company had taken a hit. There were damaged warehouses, disrupted operations, and most importantly, a deep betrayal that I had to come to terms with. Some of the people I had trusted in the company had been compromised, unknowingly or not. They had let the Mafia in, and now I had to rebuild from the ground up. I called a meeting with my management team and employees. We've been through a lot, I said, looking each of them in the eye. But we've come out the other side stronger. I won't let these criminals take what's ours. We're going to rebuild, we're going to grow, and we're going to do it the right way. The room was filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. They had all stood by me through the crisis, and now it was time to focus on the future. We would learn from this experience and use it to grow even stronger, both as a business and as a team. With the threat gone, it was time to move forward. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I had faced far worse. The Russian Mafia had underestimated me, and now they had learned the hard way. I wasn't just a businessman. I was a fighter, and I would continue to protect what I had built, no matter what came next.